This woman has mysteriously disappeared after ringing police to report seeing a child on the highway. 25-year-old Carly Russell is a missing woman from Alabama. At 9:34 p.m. on the 13th of July, she rang the police to say that a toddler was walking down I-459 south near mile marker 11. Now, while she was actually waiting for police to arrive, she did stop her vehicle and rang a family member. Disturbingly, during the phone call, the family member actually lost contact with her, although the line didn't hang up. The person on the phone call with her heard her ask the child if they were okay. She then heard Carly scream. The call then went eerily quiet. Police found the abandoned vehicle as well as some of Carly's belongings. There was no sign of Carly or a child at all. She's a black female, 5'4", and was last seen wearing a black top and trousers and white Nike shoes. This is how a 48-year-old murder mystery was finally solved. Nearly 50 years ago, remains of an unknown woman were found in an Ontario river. In 1975, the woman was simply known as Nation River Lady. Not only was her true identity finally revealed, but the man who we believe is responsible has been arrested. Jewel Langford was 48 years old when she passed away. A DNA profile of her was eventually used to try and find family matches. Luckily, scientists were able to find 2 DNA matches. Now, this is believed to be the first case in Canada where forensic genealogy has been used to identify human remains. In April 1975, Jewel was reported missing by her family when she failed to return home. Tragically, she was found floating in the river and had been strangled by a television cable. 81-year-old Rodney Nichols from Florida has been arrested. He's charged with murder and has not yet appeared in court.
Okay, so you either love the ocean or you're absolutely terrified of it. But after watching this video, every single one of you will be terrified of the ocean. This diver was in the ocean just enjoying the water when he suddenly noticed a great white shark right underneath him. Just listen to the fear in this man's voice as he finds himself face to face with a great white. This is just absolutely crazy footage, and the crazier part is he actually survived this. This just goes to show you never know what's lurking underneath the water in the ocean, and it's another reason to always be aware. The real question is, what would you do in this situation? Because I have no idea what I would do. But make sure to turn up your volume. Here's the video.
Let's talk about the woman that was frozen solid and survived. On December 20th in 1980, Jean Hilliard's car got stuck in a ditch and she tried walking to get help. In the morning, she was found nearly frozen solid in a cattle rancher's front porch in negative 22-degree weather. She was so frozen that when they got her to the hospital, the needles couldn't even penetrate through the ice. And her body temperature was so low, it didn't even register on a thermometer. Medical staff all thought she was dead, but they decided let's try to warm her up and see what happens. Gradually warming her up, they eventually got a beat of 12 beats per minute. And this method worked. She actually went on to make a full recovery. But how scary is this? And obviously the picture behind me is fake. It's just for illustrative purposes due to guidelines. But it's estimated she was frozen solid for about 6 hours. I feel like making a full recovery after this is actually like insane. I would have assumed the blood supply to your brain would be kind of non-existent and you go brain dead. I guess in her case, she got extremely lucky, especially for that 6-hour duration. Let me know what you guys think about Jean Hilliard's story in the comment section below. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
This influencer has been sent to prison for falsely reporting the attempted kidnapping of her children. Kathleen Sorensen and her 2 children had been attending a craft store when a couple apparently approached them. She then made a video which she posted online stating, "Monday of this week, my children were the targets of attempted kidnap." She explained that the pair that approached them were giving her the heebie-jeebies and said that they'd followed her out to the car park. She said in her video that she was trying to raise awareness and she reported the incident to the police. Police then released an image of the couple, and the couple actually came forward to say that that was them in the image. They started claiming that Kathleen was lying. They accused her of posting the video and fabricating a lie in order to gain attention and social media followers. Police looked into the CCTV of the event and found that the CCTV didn't match up with what Kathleen had said. Police arrested her for falsely reporting a crime. A jury found her guilty and she will spend 90 days in prison.
Okay, so these are strange and crazy rules in North Korean schools, part 1. Up first, students in North Korea spend 171 hours learning how amazing Kim Jong-un is. They feed all the students these lies about Kim Jong-un, like he won a professional yacht race at 9 years old and that he can't poop. Not that he can't, but he doesn't have to because he's a god. It's crazy how different life is over there. Next, North Korean students must also perform forced labor at least twice a week for a whole month. Often, students as young as 5 years old will get dropped off in a field to work. This is just absolutely crazy and it makes North Korea look 10 times crazier. Next, students in North Korea are subjected to some strange rules. We all know that now, but this might be the most bizarre one to come out. North Korean men only have 15 haircuts to choose from, and it should be kept between 0.4 and 2 inches in length. And they have to get a haircut every 15 days. They also can't have the same hairstyle as Kim Jong-un, and if they do, they could be executed or sent to a work labor camp.
Codex Gigas, aka the Devil's Bible. Keep in mind, this is a book written in the 13th century. The legend goes that there was a monk known as Herman the Recluse. He was part of a monastery in the Czech Republic. For some reason, he was going to get executed. He said to the monks, if you guys spare my life, I promise I'll write a book with all of earthly knowledge and secrets of the world. He told them, okay, we'll spare your life, but with one condition. You have to write the book in one night.
How long was this book?
Bro, I'm pretty sure it was going to be a long ass book. So the reason why they told him to do it in one night is so he wouldn't make it. So he was like, okay, no problem. He was writing for a little bit. Obviously, he quickly realized that
It's impossible.
he resorted to making a deal with the devil. So he told him, in exchange for my soul, help me write this book in one night. The next day, the book was created. It was this huge ass book. It weighed over 100 pounds. You needed 2 people to carry it.
Man, what the
And it has a lot of illustrations of the devil and shit. And also, they tested it out and they realized that it would take 20 years of continuous writing for them to recreate the book. Like I said, there's no new teachings in it, but there was a point in time where there was a fire wherever it was being kept and shit. They basically tried to rescue it and 10 pages ended up going missing. So what they're saying is that maybe those 10 pages were
or something new.
knowledge that we're not supposed to know about.
These are crazy facts about history you won't learn anywhere else, part 2. Up first, a group of cops in Detroit were posing as drug dealers, and they accidentally met up with another undercover group of cops, posing as drug buyers. I could only imagine this situation when they both realized they were cops, and I honestly wonder what they did. Next up, Roman Emperor Nero had his own mother killed, and ordered the execution of his first wife. And in a disturbing display of violence, he kicked his second wife to death. And to make it worse, she was pregnant. Later, he castrated a young boy who resembled his late deceased wife, and then went on to marry him. I'm telling you, these ancient Romans were literally something else. Next up, in ancient Egypt, some pharaohs would masturbate into the Nile as a way to ensure the fertility in their crops. After the pharaoh, other men would also come over and release their seeds into the Nile River. The entire process was believed to have brought more prosperity and blessings to the people of ancient Egypt. But in reality, these people were just masturbating into a river.
Some shit happened in this movie, bro. The Wizard of Oz.
Like the classic one?
Yes, the 1939 one, yeah. I'm gonna start off with the main actress who plays Dorothy, Judy Garland. She was casted as Dorothy when she was 16 years old. Throughout the entirety of the production, the executives were obsessed with her weight. She was put on a strict diet of just eating chicken soup, coffee, and 80 cigarettes a day. 80 cigarettes a day because they wanted her to lose her appetite to eat anything.
80 cigarettes a day is
80
crazy,
cigarettes a day, bro, yes. And then they would also give her some narcotics prescribed from doctors and stuff to ease her appetite. And even the costume designers, they purposely made her outfits smaller and tight to basically keep her slim figure. She had even said it herself, from the time I was 13, there was a constant struggle between MGM, whether or not to eat, how much to eat, what to eat. I remember this more vividly than anything else in my childhood.
Fuck.
There was also an incident where during filming a scene where Dorothy was gonna slap a cowardly lion, she kept giggling in the scene, which obviously led to many failed takes. And
got them
the
mad.
director, Victor Fleming, he got frustrated, ended up pulling Judy to the side and
slap the shit out of her.
slapped the shit out of her, yes. And then the next scene that they took, she was able to get the scene done. Another crazy thing that happened, there was scenes in the movie where it snowed.
And it was actual snow?
No, bro. What they would use was asbestos. which obviously,
That's toxic.
if you inhale it, it's a cancer-causing chemical. I want to show you another thing that...
These are photos with absolutely haunting backstories, part 1. Up first is the Cooper family photo. In the 1950s, the Cooper family moved into their new home and took a photograph to celebrate. However, the image was developed and they were confronted by this falling man, who many to believe was the former owner of the house. But nobody saw the man fall or heard it. They only realized it when they looked at the photo after it was developed. This is absolutely terrifying and I would immediately move out. Next up is the ghost of Freddie Jackson. This image was taken by Sir Victor Goddard of his squadron in 1919. The ghostly image is said to be Freddie Jackson, and Jackson died a few days before this photo was taken by walking into a moving propeller. If you look closely, you can see the ghost of Freddie Jackson behind this man. Next up is the Amityville ghost. This photo, taken by Ed and Lorraine Warren, claimed to show the ghost of a 9-year-old John Defoe. Defoe, along with his older brother, 2 sisters, and parents, were killed by his older brother Renaud at their house in Amityville. Ed and Lorraine Warren were paranormal experts who entered the house and captured this image using a camera that consistently took infrared photos during the night. Next up is the photo of Grandpa's ghost. Somehow this lady's husband managed to appear in this photo despite dying 7 years before. Denise Russell took this photo of her grandma, who lived alone at the time, on August 17, 1997.
The man right here tried to rob this Brazilian UFC fighter, and it did not end well for him. In 2019, the man approached a Brazilian woman standing alone outside her home. He asked her what time it is. When she went to go check for him, he pulled out a cardboard gun. Unfortunately for the thief, this woman was Poliana Viana, a Brazilian fighter. She hit him with 2 punches and a kick and then put him in a chokehold until police arrived. Once she realized the weapon was fake, she just went to town on him. The man also had a history of being arrested. He was taken to the hospital for his injuries because she beat him up so bad. After the incident, she returned home and she was like, "Oh, my hands kind of hurt. I punched him too hard." When this occurred, Dana White, president of the UFC, also posted this stuff to his story. And she still believes that she did the right thing. She just wanted to show that women can defend themselves. And she showed that because she really made an example out of this guy. Let me know what you guys think about this story in the comment section below. What would you do in this situation? I feel like as soon as I saw he had a cardboard gun, I kind of laugh. It's like, what are you doing with that? You really picked the wrong person that day. And as always, these videos are for informational purposes only.
We need to talk about Kevin Spacey. So if you didn't know, Kevin Spacey was accused by over 20 people of sexual assault. A number of his accusers were minors at the time that they were allegedly assaulted. And currently he's in England facing charges. But what they're not telling you about on the news is the weird pattern of deaths surrounding Kevin Spacey's accusers. Now, I don't know if you'll remember this, but a few years back, Kevin Spacey started releasing these bizarre videos on Christmas. Keep in mind these videos were released after the accusations came out, and in the videos he seems almost threatening. He almost denies the allegations against them. He seems very confident in what he's saying, and he says he needs to kill him with kindness. All the while in the videos stoking a fire or doing other weird things with a knife. Well, people started to notice this weird pattern back in 2019 that 3 of his accusers died in the same year. That is a large amount of people from a small group. 3 of these accusers died, including this masseuse who claimed that Kevin Spacey grabbed him and groped him during a massage she was giving him. Another woman named Linda Culkin who accused Spacey was found dead on the side of the road. And Ari Behn, a famous author from Norway who was at one point married to a Norwegian princess, took his own life on Christmas Day of that year. Now, I'm not trying to go all full conspiracy on you guys, but Kevin Spacey is a powerful man. And these weird Christmas videos that he released talking about killing people with kindness and how he's never fully apologized for what he did. I mean, it's just a very, very strange pattern of deaths. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments below. Are these related?
This influencer was brutally murdered and her body was dumped outside her parents' house. Deborah Michaels was a 30-year-old fitness influencer and personal trainer from Brazil. She had thousands of followers on Instagram and inspired other women by her bodybuilding videos and images. She had many fans eagerly awaiting her next fitness update. Deborah, known as Debbie to friends and family, was married for 10 years to Alexander Gunch. He was 50 years old and Debbie was reportedly very unhappy in the marriage. She had confided in those close to her that she was thinking of leaving him. However, she wouldn't get out of the marriage alive. In January 2024, a horrific scene would unfold. Debbie's lifeless body was discovered outside her parents' house in Rio Grande do Sul. Alexander was captured on harrowing CCTV footage dumping her body there. police hunted him down and he made a sickening confession. He told them that they had gotten into a furious argument and he'd attacked her. He said he lifted her by her neck and launched her into a wardrobe. He claimed that she was still alive when he put her into the car and tried to drive her to a hospital. He said at some point throughout the journey he realised that she was deceased and he decided to go to her parents' house and leave her there. Debbie's family have spoken out and called the tragedy revolting. They understandably want justice for Debbie, and it's believed that Alexander will be charged with femicide.
This creepy dentist was sentenced to 180 years in prison, as if going to the dentist wasn't already scary enough. So this is Joseph Clarence Cox. Joseph was initially arrested in April of 2021 after some really disturbing allegations were made. You see, 8 former employees of Joseph's testified that he had assaulted them during business hours. And these assaults in the middle of the workplace in the middle of the day went beyond touching and groping. In fact, 2 of the employees stated that they were raped and sodomized. But this abuse wasn't limited to employees. You see, 3 former patients actually testified that Joseph had abused them while they were undergoing dental work. So basically, this guy's dental office was an absolute house of horrors. In the middle of the day, during working hours, he was assaulting employees all throughout the building. And then when it came to patients, Joseph was giving them the drugs, getting them ready for procedures, and then began touching them and doing things to them while they were under. So yeah, once all of this came to light, Joseph's wife of 10 years immediately divorced him. And after a couple years, Joseph was eventually sentenced to 180 years in prison. Needless to say, he's going to be in there for a very, very long time, thank God. Here's a GPS image of what the dental office looks like. I can't tell if this is a new clinic or what, but it's absolutely unfathomable to think of the horrors that this building has witnessed. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast that I co-host with my wife, Courtney, Murder in America. It's available on all streaming platforms now.
This YouTuber died after asking his girlfriend to shoot him in the chest in a stunt that they'd hoped would go viral. Pedro and Mona Lisa had been documenting their everyday lives in Minnesota in 2017. They posted regular videos of pranks and stunts and had gained over 200 subscribers on YouTube. Mona Lisa had posted on social media on June 26, 2017, saying, "Me and Pedro are probably going to shoot one of the most dangerous videos ever." She then pointed a Desert Eagle handgun at this book that Pedro was holding in front of his chest, and she fired a bullet from 30 centimeters away. They'd experimented with the gun and a book before, and the book had actually stopped the bullet, but this time it went straight through and hit Pedro in the chest, and in front of around 30 onlookers, including their 3-year-old son, Pedro fell to the ground. Mona Lisa, who was pregnant with their second child at the time, frantically dialed 911 and told them that she'd shot her boyfriend, but Pedro was pronounced dead at the scene. Mona Lisa was arrested and she pleaded guilty to second-degree manslaughter. It was determined that the foolish stunt was dreamed up, planned and executed by Pedro, and that Mona Lisa wrongfully and tragically relied on his assurances that the stunt was safe. She was sentenced to just 6 months in prison as well as 10 years supervised probation. She is allowed to serve half of that prison sentence, and she's allowed to do that in 30-day increments over the next 3 years.
The guy you just saw in that video walking the red carpet is convicted pedophile Jackie Jahaj. In 2016, Jackie was jailed in England for 4 years after assaulting 2 15-year-old girls. Jackie had apparently been prowling the streets of England, telling young impressionable girls that he was a Hollywood film producer, and then offering them alcohol. So like I said, he was eventually found guilty of assaulting these 2 young girls, and he was put on the English sex offenders registry. However, in 2023, Jackie was a part of a film production that hired over 90 children as extras. And in the footage, even though he's a convicted sex predator, Jackie was allowed to walk the fake red carpet, all while some of these minors and younger actors touched him on the shoulders. Now, obviously, this footage made a lot of people very angry. Not only the fact that this convicted pedophile was given access to so many kids, but also that nobody had checked his prior records before hiring him to work on this project. Oh yeah, and there's the fact that he never let any of the producers or people involved with the film know that he was a convicted pedophile. Eventually, though, he was rearrested after this footage surfaced, and he was then charged with a number of things, including failure to identify yourself as a pedophile. But yeah, it's scary how these people are so good at pretending that they're normal, when on the inside, they're some of the most evil creatures to walk the planet. If you want to hear more true crime stories, listen to the podcast Murder in America that I co-host with my wife, Courtney. It's available on all streaming platforms.
A man Googled how to kill your ex's fiancé and then did just that. It was 7 a.m. on the 1st of February 2021. Shots rang out in North Park, San Diego. Mario Fierro had been on his way to work as a teacher at a Catholic high school. Unfortunately, he didn't make it alive. 6 weeks earlier, he'd gotten engaged to Amy Gabarra. They both worked as teachers and had loads in common. Amy was really excited to finally be in a happy, stable relationship. She'd not had the best of luck in her prior relationships. She'd been with a man named Jesse Alvarez. They were together 3.5 years and the pair finally split in 2019. He'd been jealous throughout their time together and this would only get worse after the pair split. He began harassing and stalking her. He would constantly show up to her house and eventually when she moved he even tracked her down there. He would ring her constantly, send her threatening letters, and even create fake profiles on social media in order to try and contact her. He then took it one step further and got a job at the cafeteria of the school that Amy worked at. When the school figured out who he was, they actually escorted him off the property. Things got so bad, Amy tried to take legal action. She desperately tried to get a restraining order against him, but Jesse manipulated the judge into believing that he would stop. Now, Amy had moved on with Mario and she was really looking forward to their future together. Jesse, however, had other plans. When he saw that the pair had got engaged, he hatched his most evil plan yet. Chillingly, he started taking shooting lessons. On the morning in question, Jesse stalked Mario and shot him 6 times at close range. Mario had his back to him and was killed instantly. When officers arrived, he tried to claim self-defense. However, that's when investigators took a closer look into Jesse's electronic devices. They found his internet search history contained searches such as how to hire a hitman and how to kill your ex's fiancé. It became clear that this was a premeditated murder. He pleaded not guilty but was found guilty in court and will be sentenced in May.
This pensioner committed cold-blooded murder and then she fed her victim to her neighbours. Sofia Zukova was an 81-year-old retired pig slaughterer known as Granny Ripper. She's been linked to many unsolved murders in Russia, but one of her known victims was a 7-year-old schoolgirl named Anastasia Alexenko. Sofia said she murdered Anastasia because she was too noisy. It's actually thought that Sofia held Anastasia captive for around 3 weeks before killing her. Anastasia's mother actually received a phone call saying that her daughter was still alive. That phone call came from the sausage factory where Sofia worked. Anastasia's severed head was found in the town, but Sofia wasn't actually linked to that murder until 14 years later when she murdered one of her tenants and the police searched her home, finding Anastasia's DNA in her bathroom. Vasily Shlyakhtik was living here with Sofia as a tenant and he was working as a janitor. He was a Ukrainian immigrant and he suddenly went missing. This was in 2019 and his body parts soon started showing up around the town. Sofia had murdered him, saying that he had raped her and what else was she supposed to do? She then dismembered his body and scattered the body parts around the town in bin bags. But the stray dogs had got to those bin bags and carried the body parts around the town. Searched Sofia's home, they found Vasily's internal organs in her fridge. It's unknown how many murders Sofia has actually committed, but her neighbours have said that Sofia would often cook treats for them and the local children, and they were always meat dishes. One neighbour in particular has said that Sofia brought her and her husband a plate of jellied meat, and it's now thought that these sweet treats were probably made from human meat. Sofia was of course arrested and she happily demonstrated to police how she had killed Vasily with an axe, saying that she'd hit him 3 times in the head but that he was still clucking. She was actually being held in a detention centre pre-trial when she contracted COVID-19 and she became really ill. She was transferred to hospital and she passed away before her trial even began. She still stands accused of the murders of Anastasia, Vasily, and her friend, also called Anastasia, and police have linked her to another 4 unsolved murders at least.
Trust me, you are going to lose everything. Punishment is on the way. This is the disturbing email this man sent to his ex. What followed was like something from a horror film. Tiana Notice was a 25-year-old from Massachusetts. She was intelligent and creative, but tragically her life would be cut short. She'd been living in Connecticut and doing a part-time job at a university when she met someone online in 2008. She connected with James Carter on MySpace and he seemed like a catch. He had a nice car and he owned his own house. All went well for the first 6 months of their relationship. However, at this point, she found out that he was facing DV charges from his ex and faced time in prison. Disturbingly, this was actually not the first time. Tiana had no idea about his other DV and assault charges on his record. Tiana's mum said that she just had a mother's intuition, that she just had this bad feeling about James. Now, following on from these charges, James did spend time in prison. On his release, he tried to get back with Tiana. However, things weren't going smoothly and she was understandably really finding it difficult to overlook the prison sentence. After a year of them being together, she ended the relationship. Terrifyingly, James started stalking her and harassing her. He would turn up at her work and send her threatening emails. Now, Tiana actually reported this to police and did get a restraining order. However, he would continuously violate this and she ended up going to the police over 33 times. After police failed to do anything, Tiana's dad installed a CCTV camera outside of her house. This helped her feel a little bit more safe. However, disturbingly, the day before Valentine's Day, she arrived at her house and found a letter pushed under the door. The letter said, "Tiana, forgive me, I never cheated on you. If I'm lying, may God take my life. Forgive me for everything else I have done." Now, on Valentine's Day, she received even more emails from James. She reported it to the police who said that they were going to arrest him, but tragically they never did. At around 9:30 p.m, she arrived at her house and was attacked on her doorstep. She was stabbed over 20 times. She managed to call police and shouted, "Help, my ex-boyfriend has stabbed me to death." Tragically, she passed away. Thankfully, due to her bravery in ringing police and identifying her attacker, James was arrested. He got 60 years in prison.
Right now, Hollywood and other powerful forces are trying to silence me. So last week I talked about how I was uninvited from a film premiere in Hollywood because I make videos featuring the word pedophile. Keep in mind, I make these videos to raise awareness about sex crimes that are happening across the world to children every single day. And frankly, I find it extremely disturbing that I was uninvited from an event because I cover these stories and blast out awareness about them. And look, guys, I understand that this is not an easy topic to talk about. This is disturbing shit. This is stuff nobody should have to ever talk about, but we have to talk about it. I mean, this is happening to children every single day, every moment of the day across the world. This is happening, and we are not talking about it. And unfortunately, what's happened to me is I've had ad sponsorships dry up. I have had deals go through. I've had people not want to work with me. Like I said, I just recently got uninvited from a premiere in Hollywood. And I just think it's really sad that because I chose to speak out about this topic and create these videos, my career is being penalized, and I personally am being somewhat blacklisted from an industry that when I was a kid, I grew up, idolizing. I always wanted to work in the film industry. But yeah, I am not going anywhere. If anything, this whole thing that's happened has incentivized me to continue telling these stories. And actually, I think God or a higher power stepped in because instead of going to Los Angeles for that premiere that was supposed to be happening, I'm actually right now in New York City working on a documentary that is going to expose child sex trafficking in the American government. And it goes so deep. It's so disturbing. And yeah, God or somebody put me here right now so that instead of being over there amongst the snakes, I could be here working on this project that obviously they don't even want me to put out. So when one door closes, another door always opens. So I feel like being here right now, this whole thing that's happened is just going to be positive. I'm going to be able to talk about these stories more, to raise more awareness, hopefully work with more charities and organizations to help actual victims and survivors. But yeah, I mean, it's evil. What they're doing out there is is just demonic feeling to me. It's just, I mean, seriously. Is it not fucked up to people who are watching this video to think I was personally told that I'm uninvited from an event because I make videos covering crimes against children to raise awareness of them? But yeah, I just wanted to come on here and say, the people who want to silence me, to those people, this is not going to work. I have personally so many new projects that are in development, including this documentary, which is crazy. I want to do so much, and that's all coming in the next few months. And no matter what they do, it's never going to stop me. I don't know. What do you guys think? Isn't that it's just disturbing, and it just pisses me off to think that this could happen when you try to raise awareness to help save children. But what do I know? And yeah, thank you to everybody who follows me here and across all my social media. You guys are supporting this independent coverage and my work helping to expose this stuff. And truly, this whole affair that's gone down has only incentivized me once again to hit this even harder, to really put the pressure on the evil forces that are out there in the world that don't want me talking about this. Screw them. And if anything happens to me in the next couple months, you guys know who did it. I'll just end it on that.
Imagine waking up hearing screams coming from your neighbour's house. What would transpire is Hawaii's worst mass killing in over 20 years. It was just after 8:30 a.m. on the 10th of March 2023 in Honolulu. The neighbourhood of Walawa Place was a lovely area to live. On the morning in question though, a neighbour rang police very concerned. They could hear screaming coming from the Oda family home. The house was occupied by 3 children aged 17, 12 and 10 and their parents. Their dad was Paris Oda and their mum was Naoko Oda. They lived in the area for 10 years in a luxurious property. Officers arrived at the scene and knocked on the door. However, the place was eerily silent, and instead of investigating further, the police simply left. Then there was another call half an hour later. This time the call came from inside the home. There was actually a tenant inside. She told the operator she'd heard screaming and locked herself in the bedroom. Horrifically, she'd seen blood seeping through the door. Police again showed up at the property and helped the tenant clamber out of the window. When they forced entry into the property, they found 5 dead bodies. The bodies were the members of the Oda family. 2 children were found dead in their bedrooms. In the master bedroom were the bodies of another child and their mother. The family members had been stabbed to death brutally with a kitchen knife. The victims all had defensive wounds, which displayed that they'd been aware of what was happening and they tried to protect themselves. It became apparent that the culprit for this killing was Paris, their dad. He'd murdered his family before taking his own life. Now this left the local community with more questions than answers. He was a quiet man with no prior record of violence. There didn't seem to be a motive, and to the outside community there was no warning signs. But Paris had a secret that was eating away at him. He worked as a chiropractor and was fairly successful with his own clinic. As I said, the family lived in a fairly luxurious home and had previously spent $1 million on it. Paris, however, was being sued. He had mounting debts on unpaid rent on the building that he ran his clinic out of. His colleagues noticed he was sinking into depression. He had over $90,000 he needed to pay back. He was falling behind on car payments and loans. Horrifically, he'd actually told relatives that he bought a gun and planned to kill his family. He'd reportedly said that he'd rather die than go to jail for unpaid debts. He callously had texted his wife at one point stating that they needed to end their lives and take the kids with them. He said no one could take better care of the kids than them. I would argue that knowing what we know now, literally anyone in the world would have taken better care of those children than him.
Kevin Spacey is allegedly one of the worst pedophiles in American history. This story goes very deep and is very disturbing, so buckle up. So if you don't know who Kevin Spacey is, he's a very, very successful actor. I'm sure most of you recognize him. He's been in all sorts of movies and TV shows like the movie Seven, American Beauty, The Usual Suspects, and even TV shows like the massively popular House of Cards. This is a really sad case because I love so many of the movies that he's been in, but the story is just horrific. In fact, before his fall from grace, Kevin Spacey was one of the most awarded and respected actors in all of Hollywood. But good things don't always last forever in that town. All the legal trouble started for Kevin in 2017, when an actor named Anthony Rapp came forward and said that Spacey had assaulted him in 1986 at a party when he was 14 and Kevin Spacey was 26. Now, obviously, this is a major crime against a minor, but let me read you Kevin Spacey's response from Twitter. Kevin wrote on Twitter this, I'm going to read it, that he owed Rapp the sincerest apology for what had been deeply inappropriate drunken behavior. Basically, he was trying to just say that he was drunk, oh, I touched a 14-year-old, I'm sorry. And while he was apologizing to Anthony, Kevin Spacey actually came out as gay. A lot of people thought that this was controversial. A number of celebrities spoke up about this because they believed that Kevin was trying to distract people from the allegations and focus more on him, painting himself more as a victim. People were also mad that he was blaming his sexual advance on a minor on him being drunk and that he was creating a bridge between homosexuality and child sex abuse. But this was only the beginning of Kevin's downfall. You see, after Anthony Rapp came forward, 15 other people came forward with similar allegations against Kevin Spacey. A Boston anchorwoman named Heather Unruh actually came forward as well and said that Kevin Spacey had sexually assaulted her own son. A number of actors reported that Kevin Spacey had assaulted them, and a lot of these people who were victims were from the Hollywood cycle, including 8 people who worked on the set of House of Cards. Newspapers across America were publishing stories about Kevin Spacey, and they were apparently getting flooded with reports that Kevin Spacey liked to grope young men. This is also important to note, Kevin Spacey was logged on Jeffrey Epstein's flight logs a number of times in the early 2000s. This is a proven fact, this is not a conspiracy, so what the hell was he doing on that plane? After all of this hit the news, Kevin Spacey was canceled so fully from every part of his life. His managers, agents, publicists, they all dropped him. The movies that he was involved with were canceled. The TV shows were canceled. And although you would think that he would have been in jail by now, he hasn't been. You see, something really strange about this case with Kevin Spacey is that a number of his accusers have gone missing or have died before the cases could be brought to trial. I don't know, something about this just really rubs me the wrong way. If you want me to talk more about the suspicious deaths, let me know in the comments. But currently Kevin is facing some charges in England. The trial is set to start very soon. And yeah, there's so much more to this story, but I couldn't fit it all into 3 minutes, so if you want another part, let me know.
This 77-year-old man went to war with a Mexican cartel. Alezo Garzo Tamez had spent his entire life building and working at his ranch, and one day the cartel wanted to claim it as their own property. In the AM hours of November 13th, 2010, 77-year-old Don Alejo was startled by a convoy of trucks approaching his property. This wasn't someone trying to do honest business. It was the Los Zetas cartel. The truck stopped and out came heavily armed cartel members. One of the members approached Alejo and demanded that he handed over the ranch and informed him it would now be property of Los Zetos. They then gave him an ultimatum: leave within 24 hours and if you're still here when we return, we will kill you. Don Alejo then took a moment and replied, "I'll be waiting. I'll see you in the morning." When they left, they definitely thought Alejo was bluffing. What would a 77-year-old man do to around 20 combat-aged men? Don Alejo couldn't go to the police either, as many of them were compromised by the cartels. So he chose to protect what he built his entire life. When his workers arrived to work that day, he told them to go home early and enjoy the long weekend with their families, not giving away that anything was wrong. Once all of his workers left, Don Alejo prepared for war, and he would be just a one-man army. He went to his basement where he kept all of his rifles, and he then strategically placed them all in the doorways and windows of his house, with plenty of ammunition prepared. He also boarded up all the doors and windows. He then called his wife, knowing more than likely this is the last time he will ever speak to her. Nighttime then came, and he was waiting for the attack, but as the hours ticked by, nothing happened. However, around 4 a.m., Alejo heard the hum and roar of multiple truck engines outside his property. The Zetas had arrived and circled the ranch in formation. They were honking their horns, flashing their lights, and firing gunshots up in the air. At first, nothing happened, and the cartel assumed the old man just left his farm. However, the sound of a gunshot filled the night sky, and it wasn't from one of them. This then set the cartel into panic mode, and a battle then ensued. Alejo boarded up the windows, leaving gaps he can shoot through, and he went window to window taking shots at the Zetas. And due to the darkness, the Zetas couldn't figure out what window Alejo was shooting from, and they then blindly sprayed their guns at the property. During the gunfight, Alejo's marksmanship would come in handy. He dropped cartel member after cartel member. He had killed 4 of them, resulting in the cartel convoy retreating into the darkness. Alejo maintained his position, waiting for them to return. The cartel was flustered and knew they couldn't go back to their boss empty-handed, defeated by a 77-year-old man. So they drew up a plan. In their trucks, they had grenade launchers. The cartel once again approached the property, though they were worried to engage in another gunfight. Alejo then let out 2 more shots and he hit 2 more cartel members, before one member used the grenade launcher to bomb Alejo's house to smithereens. At this point, the battle had been going on for several minutes, which alerted the military who were now closing in on the area. Instead of entering the house after bombing it, the cartel fled the scene instead, leaving 6 men behind. 4 were shot dead and 2 were unconscious due to being shot by Alejo. The military then arrived at the scene and they found the bodies of the Zeta members. The soldiers then entered the house, which was now filled with bullet holes and debris. They then found Don Alejo's body in the doorway to the bathroom with various wounds to the body and head. After being hit by multiple pieces of shrapnel and being shot, it's believed Alejo dragged himself to the bathroom to have one final showdown with the cartel before he passed away. This 77-year-old man went toe-to-toe with at least 20 heavily armed cartel members, with only using old hunting rifles. Don Alejo was a man of honesty and principle and hard work. The story of Don Alejo is a tragic tale, yet a tale of inspiration.
This is Shannon McCool, one of the worst pedophiles of all time. I'm going to warn you right now, this story is incredibly disturbing and hard to listen to, so viewer discretion is advised. Shannon McCool is from Australia, and according to interviews that he gave after his arrest, he started having these feelings towards other children when he was 15 years old. So from a very young age, he felt these pedophilic behaviors and desires. In the year 2011, he began working for the Families SA, which is a part of the Australian government that oversees childcare and abuse. And through this government job, he was able to get access to hundreds of children. These kids had been through it all already. They came from abusive and negative backgrounds, and he took this and used it to his advantage. He was able to get access to these kids for years, and even though other employees reported that he had been acting inappropriately with these youngsters, nothing happened. The government agencies ignored these red flags and kept him under their employment. But in the shadows, Shannon was engaging in some of the most deplorable internet behavior I've ever read about. He was a moderator for a website called The Love Zone, a website which had connections to Peter Scully, Richard Huckle, and a number of other pedophiles that we've talked about here on my TikTok in the past. But apparently, for other pedophiles to get access to this massive library of CP and become a member of The Love Zone, they had to upload their own user-generated CP at least once a month. This means that Shannon wasn't just taking kids from residential homes, abusing them, filming the videos, and putting them up on the internet for other people to seek out. He was actually encouraging people all across the planet to commit their own atrocious things. And he would then tell them that if you want access to his media, you would have to upload your own. So he was encouraging just so much abuse across the planet. According to Shannon, the first time that he had done something like this was in 2011 when he picked up a kid from childcare, was driving him home, pulled the car over, touched him inappropriately, filmed it, and then uploaded it. And from that point going forward, he was gone, and he eventually worked his way up to being one of the biggest pedophiles on the internet, dealing CP to millions across the globe. One of his alleged offenses even includes the assault of an 18-month-old child. But eventually, Shannon's crimes would come to the light. And that's when Task Force Argo stepped in, a division of the Queensland Police Service who specifically investigate child exploitation and abuse online. I find it interesting that they use a scorpion as their logo for the task force because the scorpion is the natural predator of the Australian stone spider, and pedophiles in Australian prisons are referred to as stone spiders. Well, eventually, there's a longer story that I could go into this about how the police actually ended up running a pedophile website and busting a ton of people. But that led them to Shannon McCool's house. Now, when they investigated his home, they found over 53,000 CP images, a good number of which he was actually directly involved with producing. And in total, after all their investigation was completed, they had recovered over 100,000 CP still images and over 600 videos from Shannon. In 2015, he received 35 years in prison for his crimes, but recently his sentence was slashed. And I don't think that he'll be in there long enough.
Sometimes true for stranger than fiction. The case of Richard Trenton Chase is a story which even the most depraved horror writer would struggle to create. Over the course of 4 weeks spanning across 1977 and 1978, Richard Chase took the lives of 6 innocent victims in Sacramento, California. His murders gradually progressed in violence, beginning with drive-by shootings and culminating in acts of cannibalism.
This little girl was kidnapped in 2018 and has just been found. On the 25th of October 2018, 4-year-old Aranza Lopez was on a supervised visit with her biological mum. Her mum, Esmeralda, was being investigated over abuse allegations, so Aranza was actually in foster care at the time. It was arranged that the pair would have a supervised visit at a Washington shopping centre. However, during the visit, Esmeralda requested to take Aranza to the toilets and used the opportunity to snatch the little girl in a stolen vehicle. The FBI were notified and a huge search for Aranza and even advertised a $10,000 reward. It wasn't until a year later that Esmeralda was found and arrested, but there was still no sign of the little girl. That was until last month. She was recovered by Mexican authorities in February in western Mexico. In 2021, Esmeralda was actually extradited back to Washington state and pled guilty to second-degree kidnapping and robbery. She was sentenced to 20 months in prison.
This guy is one of the most awful serial killers there has ever been, and I feel like he's never talked about. In my opinion, this guy's worse than Ted Bundy, Jeffrey Dahmer. Hi Meg, I talk about true crime. Let's get into the story of the Butcher, the worst serial killer Canada has ever seen. Robert Pickton was born October 24th, 1949, in British Columbia, Canada. Robert had quite a bad upbringing. His dad was very abusive. He actually grew up on a pig farm. From a really young age, him and his brother had to work countless hours on this pig farm, and then they were forced to go straight to school without taking a shower or anything. Because he was showing up to school unwashed, Robert started getting bullied, and they gave him the nickname Stinky Piggy. As Robert grew older, he was said to be very quiet, but he apparently sometimes had these weird bursts of bizarre behavior. These bursts would come out of nowhere, and he would just start acting really strange. In 1996, Robert's brother opened up a kind of charity thing. The charity was started to try to make more money for their pig farm. It was called the Piggy Palace Good Times Society. And what they would do is they would hold huge parties and raves to try and raise money. And I'm not joking when I say huge parties and raves. 17,000 people were said to have shown up at one point. 17,000 people at once. Sex workers and biker gangs would join these parties as well. But for Robert, it all started going downhill in 1997 when he attempted to murder a girl. I don't usually do this in these videos, but a lot of you ask what blush I use, and this is the blush I use. It's usually £10 on the TikTok shop, but it's on for $5 right now. So if you click right here, you can get it. I just ordered kind of a peachy version of this. I'm not being paid to talk about this. I just saw they were on offer, and you guys ask about these all the time. So get your hands on them for cheap while you can. So Robert attempts to murder a woman for the first time that we know of. According to her statement, he attempted to handcuff her, and then he started stabbing her multiple times before she managed to get away. This should have been the thing that got him on police radar, but he was able to get the charges dropped because the woman he attacked was on a lot of drugs at the time, and Robert used that to come up with a story. He told police, like, she was hitchhiking, I was just trying to help her, and she attacked me. And they believed him because she was on drugs. And unfortunately, for the next 60 women he would kill, he was let go. And he was able to come up with a strategy that wouldn't get him caught next time. He developed a plan and started killing a bunch of women. And Robert was really, really good at staying under the radar. Now, what did he do exactly? Let me tell you. Because it's disturbing. First of all, he always went for hitchhikers, addicts, or prostitutes. And what he would do is he would promise them money, drugs, accommodation, anything to get them back to his farm. Once he got them back, he would then shoot or strangle them to death. And this next part is why he was given the name the Butcher. He would take the victims' bodies, chop them up, and feed them to his pigs. Now, if you're not aware of this already, pigs will literally eat anything, everything. So the evidence was just, bye. They were getting rid of the evidence for him. All of a sudden, there is an increase in missing women in the area. But sadly, because he only went after sex workers or addicts or hitchhikers, no one cared. And this always makes me so mad with cases like these. Like, they're still human beings, but no bodies were showing up, so there was no crime, no body, no crime. But as the numbers started rising, people were kind of getting a bit worried. A group of people that weren't the police actually got a list together of all of the names of these young women who were missing. They brought that to the police and were like, "Do you see now?" And that's when the investigation actually began into finding out what happened to these girls. And all of these girls had one person in common: Robert Pickton. He was the only person whose name continuously came up when they were looking for these girls. Police needed a way to get onto the farm with a warrant without him knowing about it and hiding all the evidence first. And so they heard that he had possession of an illegal firearm. And so they used that as the cover-up to get onto his property. On the property, they found multiple items that belonged to these missing women, along with some blood-stained clothing and tiny bone fragments. Now, things aren't looking too good for Robert, but because the pigs had eaten all the evidence, basically all of it, they were only able to charge him with the murder of 6 women. And so he got 6 counts of murder. When he got arrested, he actually said that he killed 49 women and that he was sad that he didn't get to round up to 50. What the hell, Robert? What does he want the police officer to say, like, "Oh, I feel so bad for you"? No! He was arrested in 2002, and this trial was huge. Of course, he was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. But guys, that's not the worst part of this story, because I'm getting to that now. One element of the story that I kept out until now is that Robert sold the meat of his pigs to people who lived around the area. These pigs, who ate the remains of 60 women, were sold to his neighbors. When I say neighbors, I just mean people who live in the area. So like secondhand cannibalism. I could never eat pig again if that was me. So yeah, they were pretty disturbed and freaked out by this information, which is totally understandable and just totally disgusting. After a huge search of his property, police now believe that the number of women Robert killed was in the 60s. 60 women. 60 mother, daughters, wives. It's insane. It really annoys me with cases like these. I know it was like in 2002 and things have changed, but have they? I find that a lot of cases like these that I cover always start with, "Oh, all these women were going missing, but they were sex workers, but they were drug addicts, who cares?" And it's like, it's insane to me that like they're not seen as equals to any other woman walking on the street, but whatever. Hopefully that changes. And for those wondering, I have actually covered this story before, but the quality of the video was so bad that I couldn't keep it up anymore. Like, it really bothered me to watch back, so I thought I would remake it in a higher quality way. I hope you guys enjoyed it regardless, and have a wonderful day. My heart goes out to every single one of the victims, their families, and people who cared about them, and I hope Robert rots in jail. Anyways, this is not a good representation of Canadians. We're actually really nice people. I'll see you all in the next video. Love you guys. Bye.
This woman screamed, "I don't want to die," as she was dragged to her death in a horrifying theme park incident. Kelty Byrne was a Canadian student animal trainer and competitive swimmer. She was working at Sealand of the Pacific to earn extra money, and this involved being trained to work with orcas, otherwise known as killer whales. In controversial theme parks such as Sealand of the Pacific and SeaWorld, huge animals are either bred in captivity or traumatically captured and ripped apart from their families and natural habitats for humans' entertainment. On February the 20th, 1991, Kelty was working a shift and 3 whales were in one of the pools, including the infamous Tilikum. In a horrific turn of events, Kelty accidentally slipped and fell into the whale pool and attempted to grab onto the edge and save herself. However, before she could do so, she was grabbed by one of the whales that dragged her into the pool. The 3 whales then began throwing Kelty around, with many speculating that they may have simply thought this was a game. Others theorised that the whales were so traumatised and angered by their lives in tiny little pools that they took it out on Kelty. She was dragged under the water and then back up, screaming, "I don't want to die." After this horrific ordeal, she eventually drowned. It's reported that she was absolutely covered in bruises, was completely battered, and also covered in teeth marks.
John Wayne Gacy, the killer clown, did not act alone. This TikTok series is about to blow your mind, but there's a lot of information here, so proceed with caution. The case of John Wayne Gacy, the serial killer clown, is one of the most infamous true crime stories in American history. A brief overview of the case: in the 1970s, John Wayne Gacy murdered 33 young men. He buried them in the crawl space beneath his home and his yard, and he was connected to a number of different crimes. Gacy himself gained infamy because he dressed up as Pogo the Clown on the weekends and volunteered at hospitals and children's birthday parties. Now, the official story says that John Wayne Gacy acted completely alone. He had no help in carrying out any of these murders, but I really don't believe that that's the case. Through all of our research that we did for our podcast, we've determined that Gacy was connected to a number of other killers, pedophiles across America. And he even may have been connected to one of America's other most infamous serial killers, the Candyman out of Houston, Texas. So before we get into this, I want to state that I do believe that Gacy did murder some people, and I think he was very complicit in all of this, obviously, but I don't think that he acted alone. But why do I think that? So to start off, we need to talk about Jeffrey Rignall, this guy who was actually a survivor of John Wayne Gacy. After a night of abuse and essay at the hands of John Wayne Gacy, Jeffrey Rignall was allowed to go free. But what Jeffrey would go on to tell authorities and the media about what happened that night at Gacy's home is a major thing in this whole conspiracy. Now, Jeffrey would tell the police that while Gacy was essaying him, there was another man in the room. Now, whether or not this other man participated in the essaying or they were there to watch, it doesn't matter. Someone was watching this criminal act occur. He knew he could give a description of the guy, and he knew that someone else was there watching this happen. Then we get to Robert Bob Gilroy, who was a victim of John Wayne Gacy. So Robert Gilroy was abducted on September 15th, 1977. That's the official date that he went missing. He was supposed to show up for an event after that day, but he never showed. But John Wayne Gacy's plane tickets and records placed him as being out of the state at the time. His plane tickets from the time show that Gacy left Illinois on September 12th, and he didn't return until September 16th, the day after Robert Gilroy went missing. Already, these two facts point to a larger conspiracy at hand. There may have been people helping procure victims for Gacy, and he may have been even paying for these victims. And that's when we get to Philip Paskey and John David Norman, two of the most horrific people I've ever read about, and this is where the connections with the case start to get really shocking. And we've talked about John David Norman here on my TikTok before. This guy was connected with the higher-ups in the government. This guy had lots of political power, and he was a known pedophile. Remember, in earlier TikToks, I even told you about how John David Norman was arrested multiple times. He had Rolodexes full of index cards of the people who he was supplying these young men to. And both times, the police departments lost the Rolodexes and lost all the names of the abusers. But how did they connect to Gacy? Well, in part 2, we're going to talk about it.
If I didn't know this was a true crime case, I would think it was a disturbing horror film. On the morning of the 7th of October 2022, a barefoot woman was running around Excelsior Springs, Missouri, bashing on people's doors. Witnesses describe her looking like she came straight from a horror film and she was calling for help. She'd been beaten, held captive and SA'd for weeks. The woman was a shocking sight. She was covered in injuries and was wearing a bin bag. Disturbingly, she was gasping for breath as she had a very tight metal collar locked round her neck. It was a nurse who opened the door to her and let her come in. The nurse started to call police, and at this point the woman panicked. She warned her that the captor would kill her and claimed that he had killed her 2 friends. When police got there, the woman explained that a man called Timothy had captured her the month prior. He'd been holding her hostage this whole time. She said he'd been keeping her locked in the basement and had been SAing her. Disturbingly, she told police that he actually had a young son who lived at the house with him. When Timothy had taken his young son to school the one day, she used it as her opportunity to escape. Police made their way to the home of 39-year-old Timothy Hazlitt Jr. and found the property did in fact have a basement like the woman described. Timothy was arrested and is facing 9 charges including first-degree kidnapping. He's being held on a $3 million bond and faces 5 life sentences. Before his arrest, police were actually called to his address 3 times. Twice they were asked to do welfare checks, and this was from an employer and also family members. Police have searched his home with cadaver dogs and they haven't yet released what they know.
I spent a weekend with one of the most notorious killers in Texas. So in my early 20s, I spent a lot of time in South Texas in women's prisons units helping people find forgiveness and second chances at life. And on this one particular weekend, when we arrived, the correctional officers informed our team that there was a new inmate on the premises. She was only 17 years old and had been tried and convicted as an adult for a very violent crime. And because I was the youngest person on our prison team, they voted me to be the one to work with her because she was young, I was young, and she might relate to me and open up to me. Now, I had a rule for myself when I worked with these women to never look up their crimes. I didn't want it to affect my judgment about them or to affect my willingness to help them, so that was just a rule that I always kept. So the correctional officers, they walked me down this long corridor into a classroom where sitting at the table was Erin Caffey. Now, Erin Caffey is a tiny thing. Now, I'm a tiny person, and I dwarfed her. She's very small, very timid, very soft-spoken, rarely will look you in the eye. And my first thought whenever I lay eyes on her and I sit down across from her is, how can somebody this small and this timid possibly be convicted as an adult for a violent crime? What violence is she possibly capable of? Little did I know. We started talking and we kind of started to get to know each other a little bit, cracked a few jokes. I tried to get her to lighten up. And eventually she did start kind of opening up to me, and she started volunteering some details about her version of what had happened the night of her crime. And I have to admit, even though I had a rule to really try not to know what people had done, I was very curious because, again, here's this tiny little thing. She's 17 years old, looks scared to death, and she's in this facility. And well, her version of the events that took place the night of the crime led me to believe that she was a victim in all of it and that it was really out of her hands. She couldn't stop it, and she's haunted by it, regrets it every day of her life, and she just wishes she could take it all back. And y'all, she was so convincing, just absolutely convincing, that I truly believed that she was innocent. She had somehow gotten mixed up with the wrong crowd, was wrongly convicted. And I started brainstorming in my head, like, how can I raise awareness about this and help her get out? Little did I know, in my naivety, that this young lady was a psychopath. She was very cunning, very manipulative, and the small, mousy, timid, soft-spoken thing was very much a calculated tactic to be a wolf in sheep's clothing. And my time with her started a long season of my life of panic attacks and nightmares, and I'm going to tell you more about that in part 2.